everybody. It's Brian Mahoney, the president of Trender Research and the OTT executive community. We're continuing in our podcast series where we interview leaders of the industry. And today we're joined by Brad Samuels. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, Brian. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Well, listen, thank you for making the time here. You've been a big part of this industry for a long time. So let's start with that. Let's start with your career background and your roles leading up to where you are now.
Sure, happy to do it. So I think I kind of got indoctrinated into the media business at a very young age because my dad was a radio executive for a bunch of different companies and eventually bought his own stations. And so from the earliest age I can remember, he was talking about the business. We would be coming home from dinner and he would hear an ad that was outdated and he would pull the car over and call the station and make sure it got fixed. And I think I remember when Martin Luther King was assassinated. It was a terrible day, but he was the general manager of WWDC in Washington. And we were at home at the time and he had to run to the station and help the station cover the news and the event and write an editorial to speak to the public about what had happened and the importance of it. And I think all that added up to me to really give me a kind of a close look at how media affects society and how people can relate to it and be entertained and educated. And it just was something I think I was kind of destined to do from early days. I went to Michigan State University in the telecom program, which it turns out, what's that?
My father-in-law is at Michigan State. Yeah, that's sort of a adopted team for me, the Spartans.
Oh, excellent. Well, there you go. I didn't even know that. We're even better friends now. So yeah, tried and true green and white guy here. And great telecommunications program there. A lot of people came out of there to end up in the pay TV and media business since there was so much going on back in those days with cable growing at the time. And so I did go back and work for my dad for a couple of years selling radio advertising. And I don't know, I think I'm sure I wasn't, but I think I thought I was some kind of counterculture college student. And, what was I going to do in the business world? And I wouldn't want to sell things. That's so cheesy. But pretty quickly he threw me out in the street and said, look, go talk to the lumber yard, go talk to the furniture store, go talk to the auto dealer and see if they're ready to spend some money on the station. And within a couple of weeks, I got pretty comfortable with it. And the idea of walking in and saying, here, this is what we can do for you. And he was a great mentor and he really taught me a lot of great kind of philosophies around how to establish relationships and get sales made. And after a couple of years, I ended up going back to Michigan State for a master's program because I had kind of an itch to get into a newer part of the media business, even though radio was still pretty thriving at that time. And that was a great experience. And so I kind of opened up my perspective to lots of disciplines of the industry, but it was when cable was really starting to grow rapidly, late 80s, a lot of major new build happening in big markets. And it felt like I would probably go sell advertising in the cable business. But the first job that popped up that I learned about at Michigan State was down in Detroit at a regional sports network, which is, the name is long gone, but I think it's a Fox Sports Network now, or I guess Sinclair, whoever owns it. But it was interesting because it was a premium service, which is very unusual at the time. So it's sold for like HBO or Showtime for $12 or $13. And I think the cable companies appreciated that then, and I know they would now, to be able to take a product like that and make it an a la carte service. And I was there at a good time. I was kind of lucky. The Tigers had just won the World Series. And so there was a hot product, and it gave me a sense. What year is
that? I think my wife's from Michigan, right? And I think she can still name all the players from that team. Was that
yeah, that was 1985. They won the World Series.
I was going to say 84, 85. Okay, yeah.
84 may have been the year they won it. I started in 85. You're right. Yeah. So they had an amazing team. I think they won 30 of their first 35 games that year. They were on fire the whole year. So lots of excitement. And it was affiliate relations. We were around handling the relationships and all the coordination with all the cable operators in the state of Michigan. And it got me into the cable business. And a year later, I heard about a job at MTV Networks in Chicago on the basic side of the business. And I love Chicago. I love music. And MTV was fairly new and very buzzworthy at the time. It's kind of funny to think they only had 3 channels. They had MTV, Nickelodeon, and VH1, which had just launched. We thought that was a big group of services. It's kind of quaint to think that. And I jumped in there, went to Chicago and spent 7 years there really learning kind of basic cable distribution. Mm-hmm. And, it gave me a feel for the importance of understanding the whole business. And particularly on the programmer side, every aspect was necessary to be involved with and collaborate with in order to be good at what we did in that area of the company and affiliate sales and marketing. So research and advertising and technology and programming and marketing and all these areas that had to be kind of pulled together to make the pitch and manage the relationship and get the growth and distribution that we needed. And so I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the nature of the sell and the growth of the business. Subscribers were chasing trucks at that time. And there weren't a lot of cable networks. So while bandwidth made it a little challenging to get that next network on, there was a lot of room for new ideas and startups and so forth. And
that must have been fun at the time, because I mean, we look at cable and broadcast and satellite as kind of old, stodgy, whatever. But MTV, that was a cool environment to work for, right?
It was a very progressive company, which I think kind of fit my background and my personality. Embrace change and innovation. Everybody that I called on in some of these states in the Midwest thought that we were that Satan was our CEO or something, because MTV was rock and roll. And I said, well, everybody thought Elvis was a bad guy. Look, he turned out to be okay. But so it was interesting times, and we were kind of on the cutting edge of that. And then I got a kind of an appreciation for startups when we launched our comedy network. HBO launched one as well called the Comedy Channel.
Yep.
And we fought it out, what we call the Comedy Wars, affectionately, for a year or so there. And eventually the two merged, which was an interesting, merger of a business owned by two companies that competed between HBO and MTV. So when you looked at the macro companies, you had Nickelodeon competing with the Cartoon Network between the two companies. HBO and Showtime were kind of mortal enemies. And then they had this comedy network that they created together. And it was kind of the perfect storm of a great idea, great support from two very successful cable network groups, and enough resources to be successful, but also run very independently. So we merged the two. I moved to New York to take on the role of running distribution for Comedy Central. And it was challenging at first. We didn't have a lot of great programming. We had two formats that were not at all alike, that we were trying to marry up together. But we had an amazing team, and we had this vision of doing something that was for a younger audience, that was more original and cutting edge and irreverent. And, we kind of parsed through what we had and started to build new programming. And, we had the Daily Show, we had Bill Maher's show, Politically Incorrect. So we had some shows that were well liked by the critics, but not overly highly rated. And then, of course, South Park happened. And as I like to say, the pool in my backyard was made possible by South Park, I think, that kind of thing.
And what was your role at the time for them?
I was the vice president of affiliate relations, as we called it back then. Initially, we had MTV sales team actually handling the day-to-day work out in the field, because back then decisions were made very much at the local level with cable operators. So I came out of that team, but I was kind of both a cop and a cheerleader, because I wanted to make sure on behalf of Comedy Central that as a 50% owned property, the channel was getting enough attention and kind of effort by the MTV sales team, who had other channels that they were representing that were 100% owned. So it was an interesting, delicate kind of role that I had. But after a couple of years of that, we decided to sever that relationship and build our own team. So I hired, what's crazy to think, up to about 25 people for one channel to be out there, getting new distribution, calling on all the different decision makers, and growing the network. And South Park made that a whole lot easier. So cable companies that were barely taking our calls were suddenly calling us and saying, hey, maybe it's time to put this thing on, because it was such a breakaway hit. The buzz was ridiculous. And I only wish we were brave enough to threaten to pull the channel back then, because there truly would have been some pretty calamitous events for any cable operator that chose to drop or not carry that channel. It really became a must carry almost overnight. The show, within a couple of months, was by far the most highly rated, entertainment show in the business.
And Kenny never died. He kept coming back, right?
Well, he died and came back every time, right? So
died in the most horrific ways too.
That show, all of us have our favorite episodes, and the idea that it could still be on the air is really phenomenal. I remember, the producers, the creators, Matt and Trey, very, non-traditional, not really TV guys. And they would always kind of downplay any comparison to another, network or producer. But they always thought that The Simpsons was the best, right? And if they could ever, at the time, The Simpsons had been on the air for 10 years, I think. And they said, if we could ever have the longevity of The Simpsons and make it somehow 10 years with this show, and now it's 30 years or something. Yeah. So it's been such an amazing franchise and success, and billions of dollars for them, I'm sure. But it was a lot of fun to be associated with that. And it really gave me a feel for what it was like to be at a startup and all the different aspects of contributing to that. And that became a common theme in my career, is wanting to be at new businesses and start up new projects and businesses, and see what I could do to help across as many areas, but particularly, as we like to say, without distribution, you don't really have a business. And so, that kind of, when they sold the other half of the network from HBO over to MTV, a good number of us left because there was consolidation with the MTV entity. And so, interestingly enough, I consulted for a little while, and I joined TV One right at the very beginning of its launch. And just such an intriguing idea to have a network that would kind of pick up where the BET audience would leave off, and something a little bit for a slightly older audience. It had Radio One, which was a terrific radio company that served that audience. Comcast had gotten involved to support it with equity and carriage. And I just was really excited about being part of that. And it was a really, really interesting experience. Of course, I was not in the audience per se of African Americans or the majority of the staff, which made it an intriguing experience to kind of jump into a different culture and help grow something. And we brought DirecTV in as both an affiliate and an equity owner, which is one of the more exciting deals I was able to be part of, and really grew that network dramatically. And it was really exciting to see the industry support it. A lot of original programming and a really good new alternative for an important TV audience. And so,
good for you. Awesome.
That was a really, really cool experience. And so, I think my theme has been kind of, after a few years when things get stable and kind of status quo, I tend to want to move on. And so
blow it all up and try something new, right?
Yeah. Why get too complacent with anything? And so I jumped over to MSG Networks, which had just the two regional sports networks in New York had just brought in Fuse from the Rainbow side of the business, all owned by Dolan's at the time, because they saw a synergy between the music format of Fuse and all the venues and the music that played at the Garden and the Beacon and Radio City and so forth. So that kind of played to my sports and music love. And that was really fascinating, because it was, the MSG networks are, obviously kind of must carry programming, at least during those years, with all the teams that they had. Fuse was this very different format. I had been at MTV, so I had a history in that kind of part of the business, and really enjoyed being part of that and being there.
Plus
for
some new
years.
challenges regarding, live content, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, music is really interesting, right? I mean, to me, it's fascinating that music videos are still so popular. Obviously, they're consumed in a very different way, given it's more on demand. But you still have channels on FAST from Vivo and others that are really successful. And we all kind of thought that pre-programmed kind of curated music video format, which had died at MTV years ago, could work, and it still does. So, but we did live shows. I remember we did a Dave Matthews concert from the Beacon in HD, which was a big deal at the time when he dropped a new album. And so all that was really great and a lot of fun. Moved on to work for Ovation, an arts network. I kind of think my career has tracked with my demographic. I went from rock music and comedy, cutting edge comedy, to eventually sports and other a little bit more adult, mature, formats. So I'm not sure what's next for me, but it'll be fun to see.
They brought back Beavis and Butthead, right? So there's always a chance to go back to the edgy side of things, right?
Don't ask me to do my Beavis imitation; it's not very good. But
no.
I think my college age son still sounds a lot like him. I think accidentally at this point, but. Anyway, so I worked for Ovation for a while, which is an independent cable network, a real struggle, but a really great channel to be out there as the only arts network. That was in LA. So I went back and forth in New York, where I've lived all through my time since joining Comedy Central. And then I joined Bloomberg, which was terrific. And it really, the reason was to migrate to a less pay TV centric business, because we could all see what was starting to happen with the degradation of the pay TV momentum and the beginning of cord cutting.
Yep.
and the importance to get into the OTT world, which was more commonly known at the time. And Bloomberg was very aggressive in OTT, gave me a chance to do some international stuff in Canada and Latin America, and start to get involved in the FAST business, which Bloomberg was an early entrant with Pluto as one of the channels that had probably one of the better kind of brand names and cachet that was in the space at the time.
And you were
that was,
responsible for partnerships and distribution there at Bloomberg?
yes, in North and
Okay.
South America, which was
Yep.
fascinating. So we did partnerships with Bell up in Canada to create kind of a customized version of Bloomberg up in that market, another media company in Mexico to do the same thing, as well as more traditional VOD and linear channel distribution throughout all those markets. And so really interesting learning curve, and got me closer to mobile and other OTT kind of areas of distribution, and kind of got me rolling towards where I am now. And so I left, I consulted for a year, and I got a call from Scripps to join Newsy. I wasn't looking for a job. I was enjoying consulting. I was busy with it. But I thought it was really interesting. Newsy is a now called Scripps News, non-biased news channel, much like Bloomberg. I had a real appreciation for what that meant to hopefully the world, and the kind of alternative to such left and right leaning news outlets that we see more commonly. And I jumped in.
Also, Newsy was embracing sort of like, citizen reporters, right? And integrating social into the feed. I thought that was pretty innovative.
They really were innovative, and they also got involved in FAST very early. And while the audiences weren't huge, the organization embraced it. They built a programmatic stack. We got to know all the distributors really well, and got in early and learned a lot. So as we launched more channels, we bought Ion, Scripps did, and really grew the business dramatically. We had this great running start where Newsy was kind of our canary in the coal mine to really be a learning tool. And that really helped. So that once we had layered on more distribution and more products, we really had the entity set up to really excel and monetize in that space. And so we launched total of seven channels in FAST. We had 3 AVOD apps.
I didn't know it was that many.
app.
That's pretty cool. Wow.
Yeah, I think they're doing 2 more this year. So they've been very aggressive, mostly porting those channels over from the multicast, kind of broadcast diginet space in some form or another.
And all mostly licensed content or like news, or how much original programming was there?
Not much. That's exactly right. It was the original would be the news between Core TV and Newsy.
Right.
The rest were mostly classic TV series, whether it be comedy with Laugh or Bounce, which is an African-American targeted channel, which was really kind of fun for me to get back to that genre. And there were some good originals in that channel. So a bit of a mix, but mostly classic TV stuff, very nicely packaged by Kate's Broadcasting, which Scripps brought and then brought in-house, and that we then represented. So we had a lot of different genres, a lot of different levels of performance, and we didn't end up getting pretty pervasive distribution across the FAST marketplace. So we worked very closely with ad sales. Obviously, it's the entire kind of revenue driver of that business, and so it was a really great learning curve for me, and got me that much closer to kind of the FAST business. So they've gone through a lot of reorg. I left in November and restarted Eagle Dock Media, which is my media company, which is because of a little beach near my house that I couldn't think of a better name for it. Doesn't make much sense to anybody else. I was going to call it Spring Hill, which is even less creative because that's the street I live in. But then I realized that Spring Hill Media is LeBron James' company. And I was pretty sure that he wasn't going to come after me for infringement of his brand, but I didn't want to compete with LeBron. So I decided to make it a little easier than that. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months or so. I've been very lucky to find several clients who are looking very much purely to be FAST channels and AVOD content within that space, and have been having a lot of fun helping them start up some new projects and channels, and right in the middle of all that right now. So that was kind of a walk through the career, and
no, it's helpful because I think your background. I'd like to I have a bunch of questions, around content specifically, but I think your background kind of leads to and points to some of the opportunities and quite frankly, some of the challenges in the industry. Now, let's talk about content. So we talked about original content. We talked about licensed content a little bit. Where are we right now? We're still spending billions. I think a report just came out that said, globally content is, spend last year, it was like over $200 billion, in streaming. It was, I forget how much, maybe a third of that or whatever, but tons of money. definitely some cutbacks happening in the industry right now, but still content is king, and consumers embrace it. That's what they identify with. That's what draws them in. But this idea of exclusive walled garden content is breaking down, right? And you look at Ion and some of the other networks that you are helping to build. It doesn't matter as much, or is it just that content owners are looking to maximize their monetization of that content over time? Like, where do you see things right now? And is this a blip, or is this the new trend in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the broadest level, you have this incredible continuum of content from user-generated stuff that can be incredibly popular, right? YouTube channel creators and TikTok content that can break through to millions and millions of viewers very quickly. And then you've got the stuff that's being made by Max and Disney and so forth that you might call the ultra premium, and everything in between. And it's all finding its way to different distribution, strategies and models. And I've never seen such a disruptive, kind of challenging but opportunistic time in the business. And I think the trick is figuring out what your platform is really about and what its identity is to the viewer, whether you're a fast app or an SVOD app or your TikTok. And there will be some overlap. And I think it's intriguing to think about bringing the popularity of some of these kind of social media creators over into fast, because I think fast will fail if it doesn't take advantage of the unlimited bandwidth and opportunity to try different things versus just continuing to kind of migrate the more established broadcast and cable stuff. So I think there's room for that. And I think that SVODs will continue to succeed, but the marketing challenges and the churn and so forth present something that none of us have really dealt with, except for maybe a few pay TV networks over the years. So I do think they'll pull back on the spending because it's not, sustainable. And there's going to be a lot of experimentation, and it will be fun to see whether Zaslav's right, that this kind of bundling will lead back to something more aggregated in a subscription environment that makes it easier for viewers to find things but still appreciate that some content will come with a price tag associated with it. So that's not much of an answer, except that I think it's wide open right now, and there's a lot more openness to being flexible around exclusivity as long as the product is strong and there's a deal to be made on the parameters that make sense for both partners and parties. And it's just fun to be part of it right now because things feel like they're changing every couple of months.
It just seems incredibly complex with, how do you, the windowing strategies now and distribution and, streaming and broadcast and all the different rights. Like, how do you, let me give you a tough case study, Brad. So pick, mega conglomerate, like, Warner Brothers, Discovery, or Disney, and you're head of content now, and you've got to figure out what is the strategy. It's easy when you're kind of super serving a niche audience, but if you've got that sort of more of a, super app approach, how do you, is it just case by case? Is there an overarching strategy? What recommendation would you give to the folks at, Warner Brothers, Discovery, or Disney, Hulu, in terms of what guidelines would you give them to keep certain content special and exclusive versus wide distribution?
I think windowing is still the word, right? It's just different windows and monetization versus the traditional kind of, whether there was theatrical or pay TV over to broadcast syndication, over to cable, et cetera. Fast steps in there now. There's ways to, the late night talk shows make more money probably off of YouTube clips than they do off of their regular, broadcasts in late night. So there's lots of ways to straddle both and have success. But I do think you have to respect certain expectations on the platform side around when they get a bite at the apple and how much this content has been, kind of already exposed. And then you have to manage your own properties, right, with Max and those kind of things, and figure out where that line is. But I guess what I would say is I think pay TV, with what's happening with sports now, is going to erode even faster than most of us may have even thought a couple of years ago. And that whole paywall issue is going to come down quicker, which is nice because it will allow people to move into OTT quicker, but also will put more of that very difficult challenge on monetization. And that golden goose of pay TV is going away very quickly. And how do you make that up through all those different newer venues of monetization? Again, there is no one size fits all. It's different properties have different, characteristics and paths, I think. But there's a lot of experimentation that needs to happen, but I think there's an openness to it too that's never been there before on both sides.
So I think that's the answer right now. Experimentation, do it now, figure out what works, and then, super serve your different audiences in the best way that you can. I know we're almost out of time here. I'd be remiss not to end with some sort of a personal note or hobby about Brad that you can share with our audience.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have 4 kids, so I spend a lot of time traveling around in business and helping out with the kids, but they're older now. And for me, it's really live music is probably the biggest thing that I've really gravitated to. I go to Jazz Fest every year in New Orleans. I probably go to 40 or 50 live shows a year, whether it's locally here on Long Island or in the city or other places. Some of it's my favorite stuff. Some's a show I've never seen. And maybe I'm the guy who doesn't know the band, but I don't care. I just love going out, being with the people and seeing live music. I play a little guitar. And so for me, that's what I love to do. And I'll probably do even more of it as I move forward. So look for me out there I'll be Friday night. I'll be at John Mellencamp at the Beacon if anybody wants to come by.
Oh, that's so cool. You'll have to come up here. They just built Groton Hill. I don't know if you heard about it. It has perfect acoustics. It rivals the Boston Pops and the Boston Symphony, and just a beautiful hall out here. And they're getting some great acts. It's 15 minutes from my house, Groton Hill.
Awesome.
Music Center. Check it out.
Will do. Sounds good.
Awesome. Brad, thank you so much for your time today. Again, this is Brian Mahoney from OTT Executive Community and Trend Research. Brad, I wish you the best. Let's stay in touch, and I'll see you next week, actually, at Stream TV Show.
It'll be great. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again for having me. Take care.
All right, great. Signing off, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.